Justin Herbert versus Joe Burrow. The much-awaited matchup, Chargers versus Bengals. Number one overall pick versus the 6th overall pick. Now, I want to get your guys' takeaways from this game, but I also want you to answer this question.
Okay.
If we were doing a redraft, let's say we're back in 2019, and Bengals, or it was a 2020 draft, right?
Yep.
Okay, we're back in 2020. You're the Bengals on the clock. You still taking Burrow, or are you going Justin Herbert? But first, give me your takeaways of the game. I'll start with you, Joel.
Sure. So, first off, Joe Burrow started off the game terribly. I mean, at one point, they were down 24-0. He had a first quarter interception and a strip sack fumble. So, Joe Burrow, one of the best things I like from him and just my quarterbacks in general, it's really, I almost call it like that Lamar instinct where he'll throw multiple interceptions, he'll screw up, but you could tell how much he really cares. Some quarterbacks don't have that. Like, some quarterbacks really don't care. Now, obviously on the inside, but I like how Burrow shows it and his teammates know that he actually cares and, he's going to go out and compete and win because he came back from that. It ended up being 24-22 at one point. Eventually in the fourth quarter, the Chargers, ended up taking it away. Then it went by like 20 points or so. But when I look at both of these teams, they're very similar to me in the sense that I don't know what I'm getting from them week to week. And I think that's mostly because they're both young teams with young quarterbacks, first and second year head coaches. From the Bengals side of things, they had lost 2 games to the Jets and Browns earlier in the seasons. 2 that, looking at it now, seem like winnable games. The Browns, divisional matchup, so I give them a bit of a pass. But with the banged-up Baker Mayfield, that's something that I expect. If the Bengals want to take another jump, that's a game they should win. And then the Chargers, they had a couple bad losses. One against the Ravens was just a complete stinker, lost 34-6. And then a winnable game in Minnesota. And also the Broncos game. Forgot about that, where they got dominated. Like, I know it was only a 2-possession game, but they scored 13 points. And again, a divisional game where if I want you to take that next jump and you're an elite team, those are games I want you to win. I think they're on the road.
Yeah, I think we were in Mile High.
Yeah, but regardless, when it comes to those takeaways, look at both these teams very similarly. I just think they're both young. They need another year or two to really get that consistency. And it's hard in the NFL, especially with a 17-game season now. You're going to have some ups and downs, but they're really teams that I don't know what I'm getting week for week. And for your other question, the Herbert versus Burrow, I think if you redrafted the entire NFL, Herbert would probably be my second overall pick.
And first being Mahomes?
Mahomes would be 1. Herbert would be 2. Kyler would probably be 3. I'd take Herbert because of the injuries to Kyler the last couple of years.
I like that.
But I mean, Herbert's having a borderline MVP season this year, and no one's really talking about it. He has the most fourth quarter comebacks, the most game-winning drives, number 1 in QBR, number 3 in touchdowns, number 4 in yards, and he's doing this with having the 3rd most attempts in the league. So they're even asking him to do even more than he was last year, obviously coming out having one of the better rookie seasons that we've seen. So overall, I would take Herbert over Burrow. Burrow is probably a little bit downer for me. I'm not as high as everyone else. I would still take him over Tua, like I said in the last episode. But I think Herbert's a top 3 quarterback in the league when it comes to redrafting everyone.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying, truthfully. I look at Herbert and I look at Burrow. The eye test is clear to me. Herbert just does a little bit more better. His footwork is better. His arm is better. He makes better decisions. Right now, you have Herbert, who has 100 more attempts than Burrow does, and he's thrown 4 less interceptions than he has, and he's thrown 4 more touchdowns than Burrow has as well. I just look at what's going on with Cincinnati and what's going on with the Chargers, and like Joel said, these are 2 teams that have been, for a majority, good this season, but they have those moments where they just aren't who we perceive them to be. We look at the Chargers, their rush defense is not the best by any means. They did pretty damn good this weekend against Joe Mixon. They held him to, I think there was at one point he had 10 rushes for 19 yards. He was atrocious. Had the fumble within the game that ended up being the deciding factor that just led the Chargers to just not look back at that point. I think they scored 17 unanswered after that fumble. And before that fumble, it looked like the Bengals had a strong chance to not only just come back to win the game. I just think that ultimately, as good as Burrow is, and as good as great as the flashes that Burrow has shown us, I just think that Herbert is a supreme talent over Joe Burrow. And I just think that his arm is what separates it. Because Herbert can make throws that maybe 2 to 3 other quarterbacks in the league can make. And as smart as Joe Burrow is, and that's where I feel like that's why Cincinnati decided to take that chance on him, on top of all the great things that he did at LSU, and the fantastic season he had there. There was a lot of hype going into Burrow going into the draft. So I understand the logic behind the pick. It's not a bad pick. It's just the fact that Herbert was the 3rd quarterback selected in the draft. That's where it starts to become interesting. If there was a redraft, 100%, Herbert would be at a minimum 3 or 4 for me personally. So in terms of a redraft for 2020, I feel like it's a no-brainer. You'd go Herbert. And you mentioned the stats, so I won't reiterate, but I just feel like QBR, that's probably the most significant quarterback stat for me personally. And Herbert's number 1 in the NFL, and Joe Burrow is 19th right now with, I believe it's 48.7. Burrow needs to be a little bit more mindful with some of his passes. I feel like he's a little bit too inconsistent in his play. These last 3 games really hasn't been the Joe Burrow that we've seen early on in this season and flashes last season. So ultimately, I just think in the grand scheme of things, I wasn't sure who was the better team coming into this week. I felt as if Cincinnati was a little bit more complete, given the fact they really didn't have a glaring hole. And you look at LA, their hole was run defense. And then they really just put that to bed against a top 5 running back this season, for sure, in Joe Mixon. Stat-wise at least, and whether people feel like talent-wise he's top 5, I won't push back on that too much. But going into this week, I really wasn't sure who was the better team. And the game, until that Joe Mixon fumble, really was that type of neck-and-neck type, two high-caliber teams that I was expecting. And then that fumble happened, Chargers kind of ran away. But the game was a lot closer than what people were, or than at least what the score tells you. And the fact that I'll give Burrow this, the grit and grind to come back in the game with a dislocated pinky. You see him grimacing on the sideline. You see him really struggling to throw a football, visibly getting upset. And to come in there and continue to sling the rock was very impressive to me. So I'll give him his kudos to that. It's just he's not Herbert. That's all it comes down to.
This game was really close. I felt like it could have went either way at one point.
Yeah.
The Chargers started out 24-0. I mean, I don't even think it was by way of them playing so much better. I think the Bengals just made some miscues in some crucial moments.
Definitely.
The first one that stands out, the first drive of the game, I'm pretty sure it was Joe Burrow has Jamar Chase wide open on the seam. Totally blown coverage, but Nwosu makes a great play, gets to Burrow, beats Jonah Williams, and has a strip sack. And what could have been a touchdown turns into a strip sack, and now the Chargers have the ball in their own red zone pretty much.
Yep.
Then the other play, Joe Burrow throws a perfectly placed deep pass to Jamar Chase. He bobbles it, and it gets intercepted.
Yeah.
We have to start a petition for quarterbacks not to be penalized for receiver-caused interceptions because, believe it or not, that QBR stat takes that interception into account and says it's on Burrow. And that's why his QBR is probably 19th because he's definitely not been 19th best quarterback this year.
I agree with that.
In fact, the guy who has the 8th best QBR right now, Tua, Burrow's better than Tua. So QBR is not a
Allegedly.
stat I want to use. Only when it fits my narrative.
Yeah, exactly.
As you should.
But it's just when you watch the film, Burrow is not the 19th best quarterback. And I think
agree
the
with that.
film shows that he's better than a lot of guys that have a better QBR. It was a close game. My key takeaways from this game was that Herbert is unreal. The throws that he makes consistently, 2 throws to Mike Williams jumped out to me, just jump ball ones, perfectly placed. Herbert is unreal, and he is a top 5, if not top 3 quarterback in the NFL right now. That's not even up for debate. The Bengals defense looked bad early. They got better as of late. They got better later in the game. Jesse Bates has fallen off this year. He's one of the worst safeties in coverage this season. He gave up a big play to Mike Williams, I think, twice, and he gave up a touchdown because of a miscommunication in the end zone. He hasn't been good this year. And Trey Hendrickson won his matchup against Rashawn Slater. Slater has been fine all season.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah,
it was
a
great.
top
He's been
3
great.
rookie.
He's been great.
Hendrickson gave him hell. I mean, that was, you could see he was struggling with him the entire game.
I'm glad Hendrickson's playing well because
There was a lot of talk of that signing. Like, he got to the quarterback, but it's not repeatable, this and that. But he's having a good season for
sure.
them.
But yeah, then you mentioned the Mixon fumble. That was a fumble touchdown.
Yeah.
I mean, the Chargers took that in for a touchdown. The Bengals just missed a lot of opportunities. 2 touchdowns left on the board. Jamar Chase, one of them was his fault. The other one just got a block better. Jamar Chase should have had a 150-yard 2-touchdown day.
Easily.
Instead, he had 50 yards on a day.
Tragic.
And Joe Burrow should have had an equal, if not better, stat line than Herbert. Joe Burrow, 300 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, completed 60% of his passes. Herbert, 317, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, completed 74% of his passes. Burrow should have thrown for damn near 400 this game. Should have had 3 touchdowns with 1 pick and completed like 68% of his passes if everything goes right. Now, talking about who would I take in a redraft? If it's just my team that I'm starting, I'm taking Herbert. The Bengals, still taking Burrow. Because Joe Burrow's from Ohio. He's an Ohio kid that fits the Bengals. And Joe Burrow's a damn good a great quarterback, and he's going to be a top 10 quarterback year after year after year. This season, he's leading the league in interceptions. Yeah, but he has a lot of touchdowns this year too. I mean, he has 23 touchdowns, 14 picks, and that's after suffering a gruesome knee injury, not just his ACL, his meniscus. I mean, this guy tore everything in his knee basically and came back earlier than expected.
Yeah.
And is playing at this high of a level. The Bengals, they're in the playoffs right now. If the season were to end today, they're in the playoffs. If I'm the Bengals, I'm still taking Burrow number 1. There's no doubt about it because he's from Cincinnati, he's from Ohio, and he's going to be a great quarterback in this league. And you mentioned the toughness. Coming back, dislocated pinky, that affected his throwing motion a lot. He played through that mostly the entire game and still was throwing dimes.
Very good throws.
The score was 41-22, but if these two teams meet in the playoffs, it's going to be a dogfight.
Oh, absolutely.
It's going to go down to the wire. It's going to be a dogfight. These two teams are evenly matched.
They are.
Despite what the score indicated, these two teams are evenly matched. But if I was the Bengals, I'm looking at Burrow. He's still my guy. The only team that should be having regrets about not taking Herbert are the Dolphins.
I think almost every team who didn't take Herbert should be having regrets.
You're right.
But the Dolphins,
that
yes, because
took a quarterback.
I mean, they took him one spot ahead of Herbert. I don't think there's any doubt in their mind if the Chargers called them Miami, be like, yo, we'll give you Herbert for Tua. They're doing that in a heartbeat.
I'm not going to comment.
Okay. I mean, it's true.